All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be volume 1 in a new series that I'm starting called What is Ruling Class Mentality? And it easily could have been another entry into a series I started a while ago called White Liberals Pawn Black Liberals. And many of you brothers who have been on my channel for long enough, you know what I mean when I use that term liberal or liberalism. I'm not so much talking about the political sphere or that dichotomy between quote unquote liberal and conservative. Many wokey wokes or pseudo-intellectual so-called black people come on my channel and they act as if they're going to chastise me or correct me when I use the term liberal, because according to them, they think that it's a deep observation to say that liberals and conservatives are two sides of the same coin. There's nothing deep about that. The fact of the matter is that when I use the term liberal or liberalism, I'm talking about the word that is used today in American society that is really just a mask for what is referred to as cultural Marxism, which is an attempt to pit the quote-unquote proletariat against the quote-unquote ruling class, at least as a facade, when in all reality there's a force behind the curtain that is pitting both factions against one another so that they can reap the benefits. Who that faction is another video for another day. But the point being is this: so-called black people have become highly culturally Marxist. They adhere to Luciferian ideologies because that is what cultural Marxism is, i.e. liberalism. That is why our people, even though they want to promote so-called equality amongst the races, they also adhere to many other Luciferian ideologies, like the promotion of the woman over the man, the acceptance of certain alternative lifestyles as being mainstream, and it has led to the degradation of our people. I've stated ad infinitum that one of the main things that the so-called Caucasian liberal will try to do is act as if they're your friend by pushing certain ideologies on you that are deleterious. And if you do not accept them, they will try to demean your intellect. They will claim that they're here to help you and act as a friend and an ally, when in all reality, all they're doing is prepping you for that stab in the back. That's all that they're doing. It's just a modern manifestation of the white man's burden. They believe that they're here to shine light on the Negro, to raise them up out of the jungles, out of the plantations, and teach them how to walk upright. That's all it's really about. And once again, I do not believe in the dichotomy of liberal versus conservative. On the liberal portion of the so-called societal aspect or the societal framework or hierarchy, the black man's at the very, very bottom. On the conservative side, he doesn't even exist. Okay? So when I use the term liberal, I'm talking about Luciferian, i.e. culturally Marxist doctrines that are pushed on us under the facade of equality. Whenever you hear that term equality being used, that's their attempt to create a veneer for their cultural Marxism. They just want the so-called black man to be the cannon fodder for their liberal army as they push forth and try to implement these doctrines on the masses. They're going to tell you that they feel sorry for you, that they want to help you. And by the way, in order for us to all be equal, black man, in order for you to get the love that we've told you should want from us, you also have to be a soldier in our surge to push feminism, homosexual and lesbian rights, transgenderism, so on and so forth. That's why you have people like Van Lathan who claim that he's for racial equality, but he also has to talk about the LGBTQIA or whatever their acronym is. Shannon Sharp as well. So there's a lot that is entailed in the embracing of liberalism, and it's very important that the so-called black man understand this. Why am I saying all this? Because the NBA recently decided that they were no longer going to call the owners of their franchises owners. Now they're going to call them governors. And supposedly it's because of a statement that Draymond Green made. And this is what I mean by the wokey wokes. Wokey wokes follow after the liberal Caucasian, who often tells them that the term owner is a signifier for a white person, thereby meaning that the term slave is a signifier for a so-called black person. I don't think that so-called black people grasp this, that the reason why the slave narrative is pushed on you is so that you can always associate slavery with being so-called black and always associate ownership or rulership with being Caucasian. Our people never ask the Caucasian liberal, why would you tell me to associate the term owner with a white man? Unless you're trying to tell me that in your mind, when you think of a slave, you think of a black man. Our people never ask the Caucasian liberals who they think love them so much this question. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Welcome to TMZ Sports. My name is Evan Van Lathan is here. What's up? What's up? A story we broke is just exploding all over the world.
By the way, I want to say something real quick.
What's up?
We knew that this story would set the world on fire because it hits at the core of a lot of different conversations that are happening today.
Yeah.
No, it hints at the core of the conversations that a lot of you wokey woke Negroes are having on Twitter and that you want to inundate the average Caucasian with. When you hear so-called black people allude to this conversation that they feel like needs to be had about race with the Caucasian, what they're really talking about is they want to be trapped in a room with the so-called white man and just berate him with all of their insecurities and have him give them a hug and validate their existence. That's all this is really about. Nobody cared that the NBA owners were called owners. Nobody was talking about this other than the clowns on the internet revolutionaries, etc.
It's a massive story, which started with, a tip that we got and exploded into something really, really huge. Multiple NBA teams are moving away from the term owner because they believe it's racially insensitive.
This is another ploy by Adam Silver to ingratiate himself with a lot of these little culturally Marxist pawns like LeBron James, Draymond Green, etc. This is another example of I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So when the NBA season starts and Adam Silver says, we're going to have a homosexual night where every team is going to have a rainbow jersey, you guys have to put on those jerseys because Adam Silver is helping you out. He's scratching your back, so now you have to scratch his. That's what this is about, and that's what this is building up towards. Eventually, they're going to try something like this. And the NBA, it's interesting because the NBA does not play too far into June. Of course, that's the NBA Finals. If the NBA's regular season went into June, I guarantee you they would have some type of commemoration for the homosexuals because June is the homosexual month.
Now, we reported that the Philadelphia 76ers are among the teams that went from using the term owner to now managing partner. The LA Clippers, which was owned by Donald Sterling back in the day. Right. Steve Ballmer took over, called himself owner to be called over.
I've said this repeatedly. The ritual that occurred between Donald Sterling and Adam Silver was to ingratiate himself with a lot of these pea-brain liberal Negroes in the NBA. That's all that was about. That was orchestrated. Donald Sterling sold his team for over $2 billion. A team that he bought, I believe, for $10 million. So tell me how he's a loser in this.
Donald Sterling.
I guess so. And now Steve Ballmer calls himself.
And as we can see here, Donald Sterling is a venerator of Baal, i.e. Saturn. He is a Saturnian. As is Donald Sterling's wife. She's also dressed in the all black. So that entire escapade, that was nothing but a ritual. So that they would have justification for Donald Sterling to sell his team to Steve Ballmer.
Yes, so. And now
they're both witches and high-level Kabbalists. Donald Sterling and his wife I'm talking about.
Steve Ballmer calls himself chairman. They're moving away from those terms. And when we spoke with Adam Silver the other day, he's the commissioner of the NBA, he told us that the NBA front office is also moving away from the term, and it all stems from a conversation that Draymond Green had on LeBron James's show, The Shop, where they were discussing the terminology and about how it's coming off as racially insensitive in a league where the players are mostly black and the owners are mostly white. So
the only thing that shows is that Draymond Green is not a business owner. And at least for this point in his life, he has no aspiration on owning anything. For him to associate the term owner with being white and thereby the term slave with being black. This is a problem when you have woke Negroes being contributors to societal change. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they're very easy to puppet because they're so emotional.
So here's the first clip of Draymond Green suggesting this on The Shop in 2018.
You shouldn't say owner.
I agree.
When you think of CEO or chairman, when you think of a basketball team,
or you should say majority shareholder.
There you
something
go.
like that. But when you think of
Draymond doesn't even know what a CEO is or what a CEO does. A CEO is not equivalent to a business owner or a chairman. And they have the right to call themselves what they want to call themselves because they own that organization. You as a player, when you sign a contract with that team, you become an employee of the owner. In the same way, if someone owns a coffee shop and you work there, that person is the owner, whether they're white, black, short, tall, black, or white. unfortunately for Draymond Green and people of his ilk, they don't get that because it's no disrespect. They have a slave mentality and they believe that they have a ruling class mentality because they associate nagging the Caucasian with being an agent for change. When Draymond gets older, let's say when he's 40 or 45 or 50 and no longer in the NBA, and hopefully for him he owns numerous businesses, he's going to understand why being called an owner and having the power of ownership is a great thing, and why people should not feel embarrassed to be called owners as if it's some allusion to slavery. I mean, give me a break. But that's part of that mental paradigm that's installed within the so-called black man and woman in America, that any form of order equals oppression.
Basketball team, like, nobody don't think of the Golden State Warriors and, like, think of that damn bridge. Like, they think of the players that make that team. Which bridge?
No, not really. When I think of the Golden State Warriors, I think of the organization. That means the players, the coaches, the front office, the uniform, the stadium, etc. That's what the organization is. But a lot of these guys, they get so up in their feelings because they want to be worshipped so bad while they're playing, not understanding that your time period on the Warriors and in the NBA will come to an end, and the Warriors will continue, at least as long as the society continues, for however much longer that's going to happen.
Just on the front of your jersey?
Exactly. You don't even know what it's called. Yeah. So that was Draymond Green suggesting why he's uncomfortable with the term owner initially. So we went and spoke to Adam Silver about it. And Adam Silver...
Honestly, the real solution for this issue is to force the so-called black man to be introspective by asking him incisive questions. Like, why do you associate the term owner with a Caucasian man? Michael Jordan is an owner of an NBA franchise. Does he get to call himself owner, or should he change his title to chairman as well, or governor as well? Does he fit in or fit out because he's not a so-called white man, so it's not racially offensive if he calls himself an owner? It really makes no sense whatsoever.
Explained that he is... Well, here he is, explaining why he's sensitive to the term and why the front office is moving away from the term owner. Watch this.
Do you like the idea that they're moving away from that term owner?
I do. I don't want to overreact to the term because, as I said earlier, people end up twisting themselves into knots, avoiding the use of the word owner. But we moved away from that term years ago with the league. We call our team owners the governor of the team and alternate governors.
The owners are called governor or alternate governor. Brothers, if you're the governor of the state, say for example, you're the governor of the state of New York, you don't own the state of New York. You just preside over certain processes that are essential to the continuance of that state, but you don't own it. So they have to water down these official titles to appease the proletariats. That's what I mean when I talk about cultural Marxism. They want the NFL to become like the NBA.
You'll find the word throughout memos over the past decade in the NBA, but I'm sensitive to it, and I think to the extent teams are moving away from the term, we'll stick with using governor.
Have you had positive feedback from some of the players and whatnot from this?
Yeah, again, players have gone both ways.
Most of the players don't give a shit unless you bring it up, and they're scared that they're going to be called coon if they say they don't care. These players, as long as they get their money, they could care less if Michael Jordan or Mark Cuban or James Dolan call themselves chairman, owner, or whatever. Just make sure that I receive my check. That's all they're concerned with.
A few players have actually spoken out and saying the greatest thing that ever happened was when Michael Jordan was able to call himself an owner. But of course, Draymond Green has been very public about the fact that we should be moving away from the term, and I completely respect that.
Absolutely. And we all know that Draymond Green has his finger on the pulse of social change, because as we can tell by how he depicts himself and how he conducts himself on the basketball floor, he's always in control.
Yeah, so that's Adam Silver's.
And I'll tell you why I like that.
What's that?
He acknowledges that this is an issue that's very, very central to him, that he cares about, but at the same time, that not everybody is going to be as on fire about it.
Most people don't give a shit about. He's concerned about it because it's his job as a super liberal Caucasian to make sure that so-called black people always believe that their feelings are all that matters, not facts. That's his job, and that's how they keep black people destabilized.
As he is. Some people are going to think it's a big deal. Some people won't think it's a big deal.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into Mark Cuban.
That's why
He's one of the owners. Yeah, it was
I do a
good.
good segue.
I like what you did that. You really set that up perfectly, expertly. Mark Cuban owns the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, he's owned the Dallas Mavericks since 2000. He's been regarded as a person who is kind of in the know, like a younger, more.
But we should say it also a very progressive guy.
Yeah,
a guy that's seen as very progressive, not only in his.
Yeah, he was so progressive that he basically was running a whorehouse in the Dallas Mavericks offices. That's basically what was going on, allegedly.
Political beliefs, but also in the way he's run his NBA team.
By the way, the term progressive is another code term for liberalism, i.e. cultural Marxism. And a lot of that is just used as a facade, that fake notion of equality, because they know that so-called black people have become so emotional that we're almost like a dog that begs for our kibbles and bits. We need the attention from master to make us feel better about ourselves.
That's right. So he still calls himself owner, according to the Dallas Mavericks 2018-19 media guide.
No, I'm just joking.
I'm just joking. But we asked him about it. We're like, look, man, you've heard what Adam Silver has said. You've seen what other teams have been doing. You're still referring to yourself as owner, according to the Mavericks media guide. What's your take on this whole thing, and is it something you're going to be changing on? And here's what Mark Cuban told us.
Ownership. There's a big topic. They're trying to get rid of the ownership.
Oh, the terminology? Yeah, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but...
It's not a big deal at all.
What? If you run a company, own a company, start a company, you decide.
I see his point on that, but also...
He's with his players right there, by the way. He's with Paolo right there. He's with who? Guy plays for the Mavericks.
Oh, no kidding.
He's with one of the people who
there you go. Oh, stop it. I get what he's saying, right? You should be able to give yourself whatever label, and if you own...
I wonder if Harvey Levin were to state that he owns TMZ, would Van Lathan quit, or would he stay on his job?
A franchise or a business that calling yourself an owner, that's his point. It's not that big of a deal. He's clearly going down that path. But if the majority of the people in the league are expressing, I don't even want to say a majority, but if like a significant number of people in the league are suggesting that there's an issue with it, and it's culturally insensitive, and there's a shifting kind of time.
Brothers, you hear the language that they use there? It's culturally insensitive for certain people to refer to themselves as owners. Once again, what they're conveying to you is that in their minds, I'm talking about the super liberal Caucasian mind, they associate being Caucasian with being an owner, and they associate being black with being a slave. It's not the truth, it's just that's what they associate, and in an attempt to guilt monger, they want you to feel that way as well. The so-called black man is not supposed to associate being black with being a slave. As I've stated, during the time period of slavery, you had Caucasian slaves, you had so-called black slave owners. Slavery as a convention did not become predominantly Caucasian on black until the mid to late 1700s. Prior to that, there were so-called black slave owners. As a matter of fact, there were so-called black slave owners well into the early 1800s. Am I saying that slavery as a convention was a good thing? Of course, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that it's a far more nuanced issue than they want you to know, because they're constantly trying to make you believe that black equals slave, white equals master.
I guess I expected Mark to be like, you know what, the times are changing and maybe we should move that way, but he doesn't seem to be doing that.
Yeah, listen, once again, I think this is an issue where you could be on either side of the issue. It doesn't mean that you are wrong or evil or bad.
Right.
I personally...
People normally say that when they don't know if they're right or wrong, they're just going with their feelings. The vast majority of the time, brothers, there's a right and a wrong. When you hear people say, well, you could be on both sides and not really be right or wrong, sometimes that can be the case as long as you have empirical data for both sides. When it comes to something like this, all this is about is once again trying to help sensitive people or people who are phenomenally insecure about their own history and their so-called race feel better about themselves. If and when our people embrace the knowledge of themselves, they're not going to be concerned about titles like owner anymore, because they'll understand that they can and should be owners.
Believe that with the NBA players, with the individual, the nature of the NBA being such an individual sport, banking so much on the reputations and the play of its stars. It's a star-driven league.
Right.
That it is, to me, a little bit weird not to take into consideration something that seems to be bothering these men.
These men, quote unquote, as in who? Draymond Green and you? Nigga, please.
However, we don't know if the majority of the NBA is bothered by this. We know that there are players in the NBA that's bothered by this.
Well, we know that this is also spilling out not just in the NBA, but into pop culture, because people in all, in all different kinds of industries have weighed in on this. From Bill O'Reilly, who, by the way, just commented and said the fact that the league is moving away from the term owner is, quote, political correctness continues to dominate the USA.
I agree. Political correctness is just softening the minds of everyone. That's all it's doing. It's not helping anyone anywhere.
Is what he's saying. So he seems to think this is ridiculous, but when you talk to somebody like Common, for example, actor, rapper, activist,
broken individual, don't forget to add that component. That's why it was no surprise to me when Common came out and acknowledged and admitted that he was the victim of a sexual assault. That's the reason why he's been able to rise so high in the witch COVID known as the entertainment industry. That's an essential component of the programming, which often entails being able to open up your vessel to allow demons to enter. You'll be far more receptive to most of the components of the Babylonian Kemetic Mystery School system, the rituals, etc., if you're adulterated as a child. So it was no surprise when Common said what he said.
Around great guy,
culture god,
yeah.
Guy who when he speaks, we listen because we know he's knowledgeable.
Speak for yourself. There's nothing knowledgeable about Common. It's no disrespect. He's a woke Negro, very talented rapper, decent, semi-decent actor, but to say that he's knowledgeable about what? And it's, once again, it's no disrespect to the brother.
That he cares.
So he had a pretty strong opinion on this too, to everybody who's kind of blowing this off like it's not a big deal. Common seems very passionate about the change and for it. Watch this.
I'm so pleased. That term owner used to strike me and it didn't sit right with me. The history
Probably because you don't own anything.
of what we have, who we are as black people in this country, to be on a part of an organization and to be like the person, the CEO of that organization, be called the owner. It's just like, it's just not really being considerate of the history.
The history of what? The history that you don't know, that you're trying to pose like you know? Where you get to once again frame yourself as the victim and the descendant of slaves? Most of our people don't really know who they're the descendants of. They put on a good front. You might go back in your family tree and find out that you're the descendant of a white person, or of a so-called black person who owned slaves, or of a quote-unquote free black. You never know. Yeah, you might be the descendant of a slave, but why just put that on yourself if you don't know? Why just say, oh, I know I come from slavery? Because the narrative on TV tells you that? And when you adhere to that mentality, you carry that like baggage for your whole life. Now everybody has to tiptoe around you because you believe that you're a slave, and on top of that, the other races now adhere to this notion that all blacks come from slavery, which makes them look upon you with a superior eye, with that air of you're beneath me.
I saw the commissioner yesterday using the term governor already.
Absolutely.
So I think, that's a strong term, but I got to give credit to Draymond Green for saying what he said. Like, he stepped up, but that never sat right with me, man.
Yeah.
It never sat right.
Maybe so many of these super liberal / Luciferian Negroes find the term owner to be an anathema to them because they have no idea how to own and run their own household. Who the hell knows? We know that Draymond Green is a mama's boy. The other guys who were in that room with him in the shop, LeBron James, that's a mama's boy. From what I remember, Common was raised by his father, but who the hell knows what happened there?
He owns us, man. These men are professionals.
Yeah, so, I mean, when you hear that from somebody like Common, I mean, to me, that resonates with me, right?
Right, but does the term owner mean that that the owner actually presides over the livelihood and the humanity of the players, or does that just mean that they're employees? When you call someone the owner, you're not saying my owner, you're saying the owner. If you work at a library or at a coffee shop that's privately owned and the owner comes in, you say that's the owner. You don't say that's my owner.
Resonates with me to a great deal. And number one, because it shows you that outside of just the players, there were people that looked at that and thought, that's a little bit weird. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people.
Well, brother, no disrespect to you, but no shit. We already know that you're more sensitive than a newborn baby.
Sees guys, it triggers you in different ways, right? You'll see guys at combines and they'll be standing there with their hands up, and
it triggers you that's akin to slaves on the auction block when you see the so-called black man at a combine. So when you see the Caucasian man at the combine doing the same things, how does that resonate with you? Or do you only pay attention to the black men? Sounds like you have a personal problem.
Getting measured.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to look at.
And you see, quite frankly, a bunch of white guys around them doing that. It looks like it is taken straight out of a snapshot from like 1835 or something.
Yeah.
Bro, no disrespect, you probably need to stop watching sports. On top of that, you need to go see a psychiatrist.
Obviously, it's not.
It's definitely not. And that's a far place to go. But you have to think about sort of the trauma that's involved and stuff like that. Does that mean that anyone is...
No, what you have to think about is the mental conditioning and the programming that our people have been subjected to in the school system, where they've been taught that all they come from is slavery. That's why you have those thoughts in your head, bro.
Involved in that is wrong? No. But if you could do maybe a little bit more to take that away from someone, why wouldn't you do it? And secondly,
well, you take that away from someone by teaching them where they actually come from. Our people are not going to be salvaged by being the recipients of these empty gestures from super liberal Caucasians.
Really change anything. No one's asking to give ownership shares to the players or to do something that fundamentally augments the system in the NBA. It's just tweak one word.
Yeah.
It's one word.
And that word clearly it can hurt people, right? It can cause emotional pain when you hear that word thrown around in terms of like a white guy being a boss and a black guy working under him, referring to that man as owner. As Common pointed out, like it's not just a title. There's so much more to that, and if changing that title,
shit like this is why our people are at the very bottom. Because if the men or the males are this sensitive, how could you lead the woman? This is why niggas like this teach that the black woman is God. When they say that the black woman is God, they mean this is my inspiration for being sensitive about every damn thing.
Would mean so much to these guys. I think that, for me, I think it's something that more owners should be listening to and open to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. More of them should, and not just here, but also in other leagues, man. NFL.
Well, you don't have to worry about that. Jay-Z is the point man for the cultural Marxist movements that are going to be coming to the NFL. He was brought there to try to contort the overall business paradigm of the NFL and make them more like the NBA. So you don't have to worry about that for much longer.
Guys, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. I might take a little bit more time.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. So peace.